Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Donald Hutera, and I am the press representative for Taiwan season, and I welcome you to the fourth. I think I have a raspy sound. Is that correct? Please nod, panelists. I might need to slip away. Do forgive me. It's the only way to correct my raspy sound.
I think you're okay now, Donald. I think you're okay now.
It's okay? Good. Don't know what that was. Do forgive me. Welcome to the fourth and final webinar in Taiwan Season Online Symposium 2021, Connecting with Taiwan. Today's subject is Indigenous Artist Development, a Global Context. I am Donald, as I said before, he, him. I am a thin and possibly ageless white male in my attic in North London. I've got a green shirt on, short ash blonde hair, tortoiseshell glasses. There is a bright light beside me and a vivid painting behind me. Before I introduce our panelists, I just want to say a couple of things about housekeeping. If you have any questions for us, there is a Q&A, and I and others will be monitoring that during the next 90 minutes. Also, feel free to make any comments, or if you have any technical issues, put them in the chat and they will be addressed there. If you need captions, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a CC that will allow you to access those captions. If not, there could be, as happens on my screen, 3 dots in the lower right-hand corner. And if you click on that, it should say subtitle, and that will also give you access to captions. So our moderator today is Alice, or Chunghua Chang, from Pulima Arts Festival, and also very much connected with the Indigenous Peoples Cultural Foundation. And our guests are Abao, a neo-soul and R&B singer, and Guoting Lin, who feel free to come and show yourself, Guoting, yes, sure. Who will be interpreting. And then we have Michael Walling, Artistic Director of Border Crossings and Origins Festival. Unfortunately, the previously announced panelist, Fred Chuang, can't be with us today. So without further ado, Alice, please give us your presentation and plenty of context for today's panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Hi, everyone. My name is Alice. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the programmer and producer for Pulima Art Festival in Taiwan. I'm wearing a black tank top. I have fair skin, brown long hair, and I'm having silver earrings. I'm in Taipei, standing on the land of Indigenous Kaitagalan people. And behind my back, you can see some of our talented artists staring at me. And I have a cat. She might jump in and say hi to everyone, and I hope not. So it's a great honor to be part of this webinar, and thank you for having me. So before I begin, I want to start with acknowledging our Indigenous peoples who have been the custodians and fighters for our culture and nature. I work with Pulima Festival, which was established in 2012 to promote Indigenous art in Taiwan. Apart from Pulima Festival, we also have Pulima Art Award. The festival and award take place every 2 years, and this gives us time to examine, to adjust our program, and to try different curated models. So now let me share my screen. Okay. So today I want to introduce you to Taiwan's indigenous art world and share some of our projects at Pulima Festival. First, I will give an overview of Taiwan's art environment and the emergence of contemporary indigenous art. Next, I will discuss the challenges of supporting indigenous creators in this context. Finally, I will share our ongoing works to support the next generation of indigenous contemporary creators, and will share video clips of some of their works. Taiwan's indigenous art began to emerge alongside indigenous social movements in the 1980s. It is rooted in ideas of colonial resistance, cultural revitalization, and indigenous sovereignty. So this means we can't talk about indigenous art without considering its political context and cultural differentiation. Instead, we need to look beyond the frameworks of Western knowledge that shapes the art world today. This slide is to show you there are different laws, acts, and regulations to protect Taiwan's indigenous rights, as well as to preserve their knowledge, languages, and culture. Yet we all know there are still lots to do to finally get mutual understandings in our society. Taiwan's indigenous visual and performing arts have only recently gained international attention. German music group Enigma sampled an Elder's Drinking Song in their 1993 song, Return to Innocence. And the song was taken from Taiwan's Amis people without their agreement and caused a lawsuit that was not settled until 1999. A more positive case is Rukai cover Alas, who was invited to exhibit in the 7th International Istanbul Biennial in 2001. This was the first time Taiwan indigenous art was part of an international biennial and drew the attention of the international art world. In 1999, when Taipei Fine Arts Museum held a Taiwanese and Canadian indigenous contemporary art exhibition, this was the first time that contemporary was added to the phrase indigenous art in Taiwan. Despite disputes around the relationship between contemporary and indigenous art, residency projects and theoretical developments for indigenous art have increased in museums and galleries. Taiwanese indigenous artists have also earned a wide respect and space to develop ever since. Over the past 30 years, pioneering indigenous artists have created a path, both cultural and artistic, for the next generations. More recently, in the 2000s, institutionally and personally commissioned art projects spring up across communities. Many indigenous artists began to challenge the mainstream world. So how do we support indigenous art? The support system for indigenous art development has 4 general dimensions. Education, including both cultural and family education, is key to indigenous artists when they begin their art career. Academic training also allows artists to learn skills and to understand major art narratives. The second area of support system comes from institutions, including grants and other resources that help build a systematic narrative for indigenous art. However, inevitable conflicts and tensions continue between artists and institutions as institutions try to exert their control. Therefore, more and more artists have established their own art spaces or festivals, as you see on this slide. This is the third kind of support. Now, collaborative art projects have been quite popular recently, and these are the final type of support for Indigenous art. These projects create an equalizing space for Indigenous artists, curators, and funders to communicate with each other. At Purima, we spent a lot of time thinking about how we can best support Indigenous artists in Taiwan. In our 5th festival last year, we tried to shift power to emerging Indigenous curators by inviting them to design their own curatorial projects. We selected 6 curators and let them decide where to make their projects happen, how many artists to be part of their projects, and anything else. The only condition was that projects had to be held in local communities. We not only provide funding, but also support. Each of our staff worked with one curator, as you see on this slide, along their journey. We also helped match curators with external consultants for the projects. And finally, we brought the curators together several times throughout the year. Gradually, they became friends, and they began to support each other. In addition to our collaborative projects, we have begun to focus on the rise of emerging Indigenous creators and performers. We launched the New Talents Project in 2016, starting with an open call for submissions. Our goal was to provide a platform for Indigenous performing artists to develop and share their works. Each performer has to propose a 15-minute experimental work and execute it creatively. We have arranged performance venues such as galleries and toured part of the selected pieces to Indigenous communities. 8 creative works were selected and arranged to perform in Kaohsiung Museum of Fine Arts in 2016. And that's our first year. And this year, we're kind of running this project, and it is kind of a learning experience. And we found many challenges and blind spots. So the first challenge is many Indigenous artists did not experience writing proposals in Mandarin logics. This meant if we selected through written proposals, we may lose some potential projects. Second, because some young artists did not grow up in an Indigenous community, they may struggle with identity and are not confident enough to perform in front of an audience. Even if they know how to tell their stories, they need either strong support on cultural context or artistic expression. Then last but not least, we don't know how many of them got other opportunities afterwards. Because of these challenges, we have amended our structure of the New Talents Project. We expanded to Purima Performing Art Competition in 2018. We removed the age limit and focused on new works. Instead of selecting from proposals, all applicants had the opportunity to perform in front of a jury. We provide approximately 2,500 pounds each to the top 5 winners. Later on, 3 of the 5 winners were commissioned to produce longer pieces the next year. They had almost half a year to make a full production in the professional theater we arranged. Now I will show you several films of the commissioned performance in 2019. The first piece is from Ame's singer with her band Yufa. Anugu means hybrid or mingled bloodlines in Ame's language. The young artist, Ms. Usai Munade, is of Amis and Han heritage. She's trying to show the hybrid condition inside her and outside in a world that Indigenous youth have encountered. Now please play video 1. Thank you. I didn't hear the sound. Tom, can you check the bottom? The lyrics are very difficult. At 12 in the Pacific Ocean, and muntjac and deers migrate over hundreds of mountains, and leopards die and reborn. Forests and trees remain green, yet disappear in a sudden. And the Alikakai, the giant of Amis folklore, still plays his magic. Humans are seldom awake from chaos in this immortal time and space. Well, I hope we have enough time to play the video, but it's fine. We can go to the next work. I hope you do see my screen now. Okay, the second piece, Semupu, is inspired by Hail Mary in Taiwan language. The choreographer, Yixin Suayong, is a dancer and administrator in Dai Body Theater, another notable dance group in Taiwan. He is also a free writer. His work is in memory of his father who had passed away during his rehearsal period. Semupu means a mount in Taiwan language. The choreographer intends to find a balanced and harmonious way of letting different dancers repeat scriptures and movements. Now please play video 2. Thank you.
Mula, Minamanan, Siba, Amasi. Salah, Mula, Isun, Bayan, Awat, Lima, Mula, Minamanan, Siba, Amasi. Jalan Muati Maria, Dulu nama Budanga, La Sunasida Jalan, China Mati, Isuna Jalan Muatu Bayan, Agan Usia Tisuna Pinatabangan Cai Yesu, Jalan Muan, Nani Mati, Ni Maria, La Tisuna Mai Namanan Tuani Patba, Masih Kutu Patai Matai Amen. La Namuati Maria, Dulu nama Budanga, La Sunasida Jalan, China Mati, Isuna Jalan Namua Tua Bayan, Aban Usia Isuna Pinatabangan Cai Yesu, Jangan Waan, Nani Mati, Di Maria, La Isuna Ngai Namanan Tuania Pasba, Masih Tutu Patai Matai Amen.
Okay, let's see. Okay. Okay, the last piece, Pink, is from emerging Taiwan choreographer Alu. Pink is about his memory in tribal weddings. Alu became the bride and groom, laced and free during the wedding party. The pink color washed the whole space, expressing both the freedom and dominance of his body. So let's see the video 3. Okay, it's very tiring. Okay. So here are the 3 video clips that I shared. Actually, our third open call was last year. We selected and produced 3 of the winning pieces this year. And this time we have partnered with the National Theatre in Taipei. The show that should be on this June was actually postponed to next May due to the pandemic. So this year, I'm planning an online exhibition for our young Indigenous new talents, both visual and performing arts. The virtual exhibition is launched this September. I would love to share the link when it opens, and you can also share Purima link online. Okay, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you during the UK or QA. So our next panelist is Abao. Abao is an award-winning musician who have won 5 awards at the 31st Golden Melody Awards. She has put great efforts to preserve her Taiwan music heritage. More importantly, she has initiated her Nawa project and encouraged many young Indigenous musicians by creating a YouTube channel, Nawa. Now it's time for Abao.
Hello. Hello.
Okay. So 我们等一下那个 So Tom, would you please help us to share the PDF? Yes. Thank you. 好，
我可以讲话了吗？
可以的。
Hello everyone. Tiba-tiba mapula is mean hello everyone in Taiwanese language. My name is Abao Alilung. Alilung is my Taiwanese name. I'm a singer, writer, actor, and who is still learning Taiwanese cultures in Taiwan. So, pass to go team.
Okay, so all right. So next page, please, Tom. Thank you. All right, so in these pages, I will very briefly introduce Abao's personal experience of her working. Okay, so all of you know that Abao is an ordinary diva of Taiwan who is very popular in Taiwan. So she initially broke into the Mandel pop market in 2003, releasing her first Mandarin album, Abao and Brandy, which has been awarded the Golden Melody Award for the best vocal group. And in 2005, she went back to work in the field of her professions, the registered nurse. But after years, she has received an invitation of being presenter of Taiwanese Indigenous TV until now. So, and very important starting points in 2014, Abao have completed an album of the East Taiwan folk and the three generations, Dongpai Sanshen Dai, with her mother and grandmother, recording the ancient ballets to fulfill her grandmother's wish. And then the next year, she has started up Nawa Culture Company and launched a project to record indigenous music from all over Taiwan. Okay, so after years of doing some important works, Abao has gone out of her way to create another milestone record, Ginagayan means mother town, which was nominated for 8 Golden Melody Awards. And this album, sung mostly in her indigenous Taiwan language, went on to win Best Album and the Best Song of the Golden Melody Awards, a very remarkable feat for a Taiwanese indigenous music production given the dominance of Mandel pop. And today, Abao has performed at different kind of the events such as Glastonbury in UK, CNW in Canada, Taiwan Plus in Tokyo, and the Taiwanese Waves in New York's Central Park. And then now she guides and supports the younger musicians to participate in music production with their heritage culture. So this project is Naowa #1, so means N1, the compilation album of 7 young, different talented musicians. Yeah, so I think that's it. Okay, so this is a very kind of brief introduction of her personal experience. Okay, so next page, please. Thank you. So 鲍姐你可以继续了。
我做了一个计划叫做 Nawa. Nawa means wonderful or beautiful things in Taiwanese words. 然后会开始做这个计划，它最主要就是会走在台湾的部落里面去做声音的采集，不限族群，也不限年龄。
So the reason I started this project is I can just walking around all the tribes in Taiwan to collect the indigenous music and sound and whatever the ethnic groups is, whatever the ethnic groups are.
在台湾，其实我自己是排湾族，但是在台湾有16个原住民的族群，其实只有自己的族群我比较了解，我也会很好奇其他的族群的生活以及歌谣，所以在大概2015的时候就开始做了这个计划。
Okay, so because in Taiwan I'm Taiwanese, but however in Taiwan there are 16 different kinds of the ethnic groups. I only understand my own culture, so I'm really curious about others' culture and others' life. So I started this project in 2015.
好，我们现在所看到的这个图片是在台东一个叫做卡大地部知本部落所拍摄的。在这个照片里面，其实我是没有办法踏进去这个建筑物的，因为我们在录制这个歌的时候是在他们的男子会所啊，男子会所的话，女生是不能进去的。所以在这次的收录里面，算是一个非常特别的经验，一直到现在，他们还是遵守这样的规定。
Okay, so you can see this slide. The photo is in Taitung, the Kadadi tribe. And because in this building, I cannot enter to this building because this is a very special building just for males. I remember it's Balakwan, the males.
Yeah.
So the females cannot enter to this building. So when we record these sounds, I cannot enter to this building. So this is a very kind, special, unique experience when I doing the collection, the sound collection. And until now, they still keep this ritual until now. So,
okay. Next slide,
okay,
please.
next page. Yeah, next page, please.
好，我在这个计划里面，每一个图片代表不同地方的族群。从左边的那个男子就是一个排湾族的雕刻师傅的家，但是他同时也非常喜欢唱歌。这个作品是从他爸爸那一代，然后他现在是做一个音乐的创作者。那在右边这一群人，他们是比较排湾、屏东、三地门那边比较传统式的建筑，比较传统式的穿着 ，sorry， 比较传统式的穿着，然后他们是以合唱的方式。然后在下面有山景的那个部分是在花莲的德鲁古的族群，然后在左边你可以看到有一个十字架，这个很特别，它是在新竹五峰的泰雅族。那因为在那边的泰雅族有受很多天主教的影响，所以你在他们的教堂里面可以看到融合非常多泰雅族的元素，包含你会看到十字架的左边跟右边都有原住民生活的样子，有抬猪的啦，还有打小米的啦，还有以及织布机的。
Okay, so in these slides, you could see different photos, and each photos represents a different kind of the ethnic groups. So the top left is a curving artist's house, and he likes to singing as well. So he create music from, and all this house is from his father's generations. And the right side and top is from the Pingdong. And then this is a very, very traditional costumes. And they usually use the harmony groups to share their music. And on the below, the right hand is about the Dalugu ethnic group from Hualien. And the left is from Hsinchu. And the church is very special that you could see the icon, the symbol on the top of the cross. And actually they are from the Catholicism. So sometimes if you go into the church, you could see very different kind of the icons on the wall, and you could hear different kind of the music from their culture.
这样子做的原因，我让他们在他们喜欢的背景前面唱歌，所以他们在唱歌的时候，我们看着 YouTube 的 video， 也可以顺便知道他们背后在这个框框里面的故事，看到不同族群在家里或是在他们喜欢生活环境里面的样子，在一首歌的时间里面。
Okay, so okay, so in this project, I did this way. It's just because I let them to sing in their very comfortable zone, like the background which is they like. So if we watch the videos through YouTube, through the frame, you can understand their whole story and whole culture, and during one song, during the time of one song. So that's what I want to do.
So next page.
Next page, please. Thank you.
很好听吧？
Yeah, is that good, right? Okay.
我们在拍摄的，刚刚大家看到这个影片里面的孩子，当时是17岁的一个在台东的排湾族的女生。
Okay, so in that video, so when we filming her at that time, she just like 17 years old, and she is from Taiwan.
然后我们在录制的每一个影片都是 one take 的。为什么要 one take？ 因为我们在家里唱歌的时候不会剪接就很好听，我觉得那个是一个很自然的状况，所以我想要大家都可以看到这个自然唱母语歌还有的样子。对。
And each videos of this project is all take in one take, because I think everyone sings in their house at home. It sounds good, so without editing. So I think I can make the audiences to understand this naturally sounds, and it's too nature and too beautiful.
如果你们对刚刚那首歌有兴趣，我可以简短的介绍一下。这是一首排湾族语的情歌，叫做 Sas Alam。Sas Alam 在排湾族语的意思是轻松的意思，你可以把它想成现在年轻人常讲的 chill 或 relax 的意思。那这个歌它是一首对唱的情歌，但珍妮她只有唱女生的部分。那她歌词的内容讲的就是它会像你又像云，然后飘来飘去，然后很美。对，大概会用一些大自然来比喻对方，我喜欢你的这种感觉。
Okay, so if you are interested in that songs, I could introduce a little bit about these lyrics. And then this is a love song from Taiwan ethnic groups. And the name of this, the title of this song means relax and chill. So chill is a very popular way for younger generations. And this is kind of the love song between male and females. But the Madaman just sing her part of the female's part. And the lyrics is about they usually take the nature scene to express their love to each other, like the cloud and the sunset.
在某些排湾族语歌会有一些特色，就是你可以听到它的 melody 都是一样的，但其实它每一段歌词都唱的不一样。像我们刚刚会听到很多一样的音。如果大家还觉得很好听，还想继续听的话，你们可以上 Nawa 的 YouTube， 这些影片都在里面，有各个不同族的母语歌曲。
And in Taiwan songs, there it's a very different description. Like all the melody sometimes it's the same, but the lyrics is different from different parts. So when you see these videos, actually you could see the same notes or same melodies, but the lyrics represent different stories. So if you really like these videos, you could just go on the Naua's YouTube, so you can follow and you can get much more about different kind of the ethnic groups, music and culture.
好，接下来因为我在做这个南无瓦的过程当中，发现了像刚刚马尼马尼他Remerman 他这个歌者，这种年轻的歌者，但是他们对于唱片的行业有兴趣的时候，我就会接着把他们带到跟现在的唱片工业一起结合在一起，也就是我们现在所看到的这个投影片上面所写的，就是当台湾的原住民文化跟流行音乐的工业结合在一起的时候，让这些原住民青年对音乐有兴趣的孩子接触一个去拍 MV， 然后去拍平面，然后接触怎么样去养成一个专业歌手的经历。接下来我就要介绍这件事情。
Okay, so in this society, that because when I was doing the Na'ua project, I met different kind of the younger musicians, and they're talented. So I bring them to participate in the mainstream popular mental pop industry and make this indigenous culture to meet the popular music industry, and hope bring the younger generations, younger musicians to understand how the whole process of completing an album, like music productions, music video productions, and all these kind of things, that they can cultivate their own abilities to join this popular music industry. And this is what I want to introduce for you. Next page. Thank you. All right, so next one. Thank you. Just bear me seconds. Okay, so because Abba just lose her connections, so now it's okay. All right. So can you hear me? It's okay. Okay. All right. So because Abba just lose her connections now, so I can just introduce a little bit about this album, I think. All right. All right. It's okay. It's okay. So we can wait for Abba's. And I can introduce a little bit about this new album from Nauwa project. because all right. Okay.
Hello, I'm here
Hi.
just in case you need me, Guoting.
Yeah. So if I want to wait for Abao's coming back, so because I understand, yeah.
But we can talk in the meantime. And can you tell me, how do you know her? What is your connection with her?
Yeah, because my PhD thesis is interviewing all the musicians from different kind of the music genres. So that's what I knew about. And I participated in the course of the indigenous culture and music, which Abao is a teacher. And so I knew some of these younger generations, younger musicians on these slides. I met them. Yeah.
And one question that I had, I thought it was so fascinating, interesting to hear about, I hadn't really thought about interactions or lack of interactions between different indigenous communities.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating that Abao is taking this interest and essentially mentoring younger emerging artists, et cetera, et cetera. Is that fairly uncommon? Is it happening very much? Are more established artists giving that hand up, to others? Do you know?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but actually, okay, you're coming back. Okay, good.
Hello everyone, I'm back. I'm so sorry. 好，你从哪里开始介绍？
专辑 the album， 不然当然 just wondering 啊，当然就是有一点他在问那个就是在那个部落就是社群里面的连接跟连接之间的那个帮助是通常是常常出现的吗？还是说就是其实就是关于这个帮助跟连接的部分？对啊，他是问这个问题。
好，
那你可以继续。
我现在要
对 ，OK，
继续我的 presentation 吗？ Okay.
Yeah, so maybe we can just keep going. Okay.
Yeah. We can answer that later.
Okay.
I will disappear now.
Okay.
Thank you for 7 minutes. 好，这个是我刚刚前面讲的 Nawa Project， 就是从部落如果连到唱片工业的话，我们在今年推出了7个不同的母语歌手。每一个人会用他们自己的母语来创作，然后用这首歌去拍 MV， 他们然后一起表演。在这张专辑里面，其实是一个合集的概念，7个不同的青年原民歌手用自己的母语写自己的歌，然后跟流行音乐在华语流行音乐的工作厅一起工作。
Okay, so this album is connected to the project that I just want to introduce. There are 7 different younger indigenous musicians, and they composed the music in their heritage languages. And this is an album which is compilation of the album that all these younger musicians can join the music videos and created their own culture, heritage, languages, songs in this album, and they can connect it to the mainstream popular music industry.
这么做是因为现在的年轻一代的原住民，他们没有机会去使用他们自己的语言，所以借由创作，他们可以真正在生活当中去使用它们。
So I do this is just because that the younger generations, they don't have the opportunities to use their heritage languages in their daily life. So if we put them to create their music, they can use the languages to compose and to create the music.
Now next page.
Okay, next page. Thank you.
除了音乐以外，我们也会跟在部落的排湾族的艺术家合作。在这张专辑的设计，这个就是我们跟一个排湾族的青年绘画家叫勒勒丹巴瓦瓦隆一起合作，希望在这样作品的呈现当中，大家可以看到原民文化在现代 音乐作品上面的展现。
Okay, so it's not just a music, and we also invited the indigenous artists like painting artists to join us to create this site. You can see this site. This is the album cover that we invited the younger painting artist Dan to join us. You can through this kind of album, you can just not listen to the music and you can understand the contemporary culture, indigenous cultures from this cover.
So here is my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so Zheng Huang, thank you.
Okay.
Michael,
So,
the floor is yours. I've got it covered, Alice.
Well, thank you both of you for covering me. Thank you.
Doubly welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Very kind of both of you to do that. And thank you, Zhenghua, for at the start of this session, just reminding us it's a good idea when we're working with Indigenous people and talking to and about Indigenous people to acknowledge the custodians of the land that we're on. Of course, when you're in a virtual chat room, that's a little bit harder than it is when you're on land. But let's just say, for the sake of argument today, that we acknowledge the Indigenous people of Taiwan as the custodians of the land where some of us are speaking from, that we acknowledge the Indigenous people of Scotland, the Gaelic speakers, the Celts, who have been in these islands a lot longer than anybody else. And also perhaps because we're on Zoom, we should think about the lands where the Zoom Corporation is based in the San Francisco Bay and acknowledge the Ohlone people. And those acknowledgements are very, very important to the sort of work I'm going to talk about. Before I do, I should just tell you, those who can't see me properly, that I'm Michael Walling. I'm a white man. I'm middle-aged and balding, and I'm sitting in my study in London surrounded by books. And thank you all for inviting me here today to talk about Origins, which is a UK-based festival, which offers a British context for Indigenous artists. I slightly question the title of this session, Indigenous Artist Development, a Global Context, because the suggestion so often behind development is that it means more money, or it means becoming more like Western cultures. And we have we had until very recently, a Department for International Development in the government in the UK, which has now been disastrously cut. And that was often misunderstood as meaning giving out money to people. It's not that. We also have development departments in a lot of arts organizations in the UK, and those tend to mean raising money. I don't want to talk about development in that way. I want to talk about the kind of development which can occur when you get a genuine cultural interaction between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, which seems to me something that's incredibly necessary in the world right now. And that is the reason that we set the Origins Festival up in the first place, because we're going through a long period of recognition as a global society that difference matters. And that actually homogenization is just another form of imperialism. And that global capitalism, globalization, is also just another form of imperialism. And that these things are irrevocably damaging the planet, and we need to find a way back to something which celebrates the local, which celebrates difference, and which understands different ways of living with nature. The United Nations panel that reported last week said that human interventions were largely responsible for climate change. And of course, you can understand what they're saying, but actually it's a slightly misleading statement, because not all humans are responsible for climate change. Indigenous people across the planet are emphatically not responsible for climate change. It is the Western model the capitalist model development, if you like, that is to blame for what's happening to the planet at the moment. And so what I think we need in a global context is a space where those of us who belong to dominant cultures can listen to indigenous voices and to hear that there are other ways of living. And of course, that's best done in the form of arts and culture, through music, through dance, through visual arts, because these appeal to emotions. And in the end, we're not going to get to a better, more progressive place just by talking like this, just by arguing, just by saying, well, where's the flowchart to prove that? What we need to do is connect on a human and more than human level and recognize that we're part of a big global ecosystem which we've been in the process of destroying, and that we have to shift the ground. And so it was really with those things in mind that we set up the Origins Festival more than a decade ago now. And it has given us a UK context in which Indigenous cultures have become more and more visible, particularly in London. It's not always the easiest thing in the world to know how to welcome people into our space, because of course ours is an imperial space, and ours is a space which has lost contact with some of the great artistic achievements of Indigenous cultures, which are ceremonies. And so here you see the opening ceremony of a previous Origins Festival, where a group of Indigenous people from the Pacific who live in London kindly shared with us their ceremonial framework within which we were able to give our own speeches of welcome. Instantly you see, this is development, this is dialogue, this is people coming together to make change. And the man who's standing up there in the hat delivering a speech of welcome is someone who we asked to join us because he's like an elder in the British theatre. That's Mark Rylance, the Oscar-winning actor. And the opening event is not just about people sitting back and listening. You can see here the lady standing on the stage with the drum is Mo Clark from Canada, and she is leading a round dance which everyone in the room participated in. You can see there in the picture there's a chief from a North American tribe holding hands with the former deputy director of the South Bank Centre in London. That's something which wouldn't happen anywhere else. It's very, very difficult to get those two people to be in the same room. But festivals allow you to do it, or at least festivals prior to 2020, 21. And I'm sure we'll be back. One of the other things which we've really tried to do in Origins is to bring Indigenous cultures right into the kind of institutional spaces of British culture, if you like, the imperial spaces, actually. This is the British Museum. And of course, the British Museum is notorious for its, well, let's say looting of artifacts from all over the world. The idea behind it was that it would have all the world under one roof. And of course, it could do that because it was put together at a time when all the world was under one rule, which was largely British. In 2015, they did an exhibition about Indigenous Australia. And these guys, who were the Zugabal dancers from the Torres Strait, came and we presented them as performers alongside that exhibition. And this was extraordinary because, of course, everyone in the UK was, oh, yes, there's the Indigenous Australia exhibition. Isn't it nice to see these old-fashioned ancient artifacts dead behind glass? But you bring someone living into the room, working with those artifacts, living in that cultural tradition, and something different happens. You get a sense that there's a real dialogue, and that actually this is not a dead culture or museum culture. This is something which is alive right now, and that these are modern people who get on planes and travel around the world and are perfectly able to enter into a dialogue with you and are not primitive, but that actually they have an enormous amount to teach us rather than the other way around. This was at the National Maritime Museum. This is Tanya Tagaq, who is an Inuk singer from the Arctic. And Tanya works with the tradition of throat singing from her people to create this extraordinary, very idiosyncratic electronic sound. And we showed a film, a very old film called The Nuke of the North. It's the first documentary ever made, except it's not really a documentary because it's been so carefully manipulated by the filmmakers to give an impression of the Inuit as primitive people. And Tanya improvised her own soundtrack to the piece at the National Maritime Museum, which is another symbol of British imperialism. And so these imperial spaces are being claimed by the people whose cultures are on display there. And this is a very, very important political act of acting back to the center, of saying, actually, we're here, these things are ours. So now let's level the playing field and let's find a different way of having a relationship with each other. We've done work in the open air. These are the Voladores de Papantla from Mexico, whose great ceremony where they fly from the pole is a fertility rite. And we did this in London on midsummer, the summer solstice. This is Shakespeare's Globe, where this Native American performer, Madeline Sayet, presented a piece which is about her own engagement as a native theatre maker with Shakespeare, her time spent in London, her realization that there was a Mohegan person buried just along the road from the Globe. And there she is actually talking on the stage of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. And we do very contemporary work as well. This is a piece called Eno Moxo, which you can see is a very multimedia dance, film, ceremony combination. Donald will remember this because he reviewed it. We did that at the South Bank Centre. This is a piece by a Māori dance artist called Victoria Hunt. Again, highly contemporary dance, but absolutely about the body and the Indigenous body as something that signifies presence in the contemporary world. And here's Cliff Cardinal doing a piece of theatre called Huff, which won lots of awards when it came to Edinburgh, but we had it first, Edinburgh. We always have a panel of talks, and you can see one of the exciting things about this is that on the same panel here, there's an Indigenous Australian visual artist, there's an Indigenous First Nations artist from Canada, and there's an art historian who is from the Sioux Nation of what's now the United States. They're all there in the same space. They're all talking together. These people would not normally meet, but we can do it in London. We can bring people together from all over the place, and that's very, very good for the artist's self-esteem, development, if you like, for setting up creative dialogues. The world's very good, after all, at convincing you you're mad if you're saying anything sensible. But when you meet people who are thinking the same things from the other side of the planet, then actually you can go back to your land refortified, revitalized, regenerated. And of course, there's a very willing audience at all of those talks. We've also been doing recently quite a lot of work where we've put Indigenous artists into the community. And this was an important work in 2019, where Brian Solomon, who's the guy standing up in the center of this picture, worked with young people from the community around Grenfell Tower. For those who don't know, Grenfell Tower was a tower block in quite a poor area of London where there was an appalling fire and 70 people died. And it brought to the fore a lot of the social divisions in British culture. And Brian's technique as an Indigenous person from Canada in his case, is to do with people understanding their body and dance and music as a way of connecting with the land on which they live. It doesn't make them Indigenous. Clearly, if you look at the different faces, these are not Indigenous people to the UK, but it does make them understand it in terms of belonging and of relationship to place and space. And that seems to me to be very, very important in all Indigenous culture, including Taiwanese. This year, we're not able to do the festival in quite the same way. We're having to work over a much longer period of time. We're having to do quite a lot of our events online, and we are slowly starting to do work which will bring Indigenous cultures to the UK in a different way. This is one example. You're the very first people to see this. This is a totem and its carver. It's carved by Huntibercio from Mexico, from the Totonac Nation. And the totem is to do with his response to climate change. And it's currently on a ship crossing the Atlantic Ocean. It's going to arrive in the UK in the middle of September. And we're going to take it on a journey through a whole series of iconic sites across the country, ending up in Glasgow in November for the COP26 Climate Summit. Because if COVID is stopping a lot of Indigenous people who wanted to travel to the UK for that summit from being there, we need to find other ways of foregrounding the Indigenous voice. And so this is going to be above the road as people drive into Glasgow, and they're going to see that there are Indigenous people who want us to think differently about our relationship with the planet. And in the same way, we are working with Taiwanese Indigenous artists, even though they've not been able to travel here, and even though the plan for me to travel to Taiwan and to meet them hasn't happened. But we were able to work together online to establish some ideas and to show an exhibition, an online exhibition of Indigenous Taiwanese women's art. Here's one example. This is called Indigenous Woman. And it so clearly arises out of the particular culture of the artist, Mile Malawi. And I'm so sorry if I pronounce these names wrong. It's because I haven't met the people in person and I haven't had the exchange of language, which you usually have. But this is very emphatically a piece emerging from her culture about identity, about female identity, about cultural identity, and about stating presence, which is always very, very important when you're showcasing minority work. This piece by Eleng Luluan is about a journey which she made back to her own home village. The whole exhibition you can still see on our website, the originsfestival.com. But I wanted to highlight this piece in particular because it seemed to me to strike at the heart of what's really, really potent in the exhibition in many Indigenous cultures, and particularly perhaps in Indigenous Taiwanese culture at the moment, in relation to the global conversation. Eleng made this piece after she had journeyed back to her own community because the journey was so difficult. And the reason that the journey was so difficult is that the landscape has been destroyed and was destroyed right back in 2009 by Typhoon Morakot. Taiwan is one of the many places where Indigenous people live, which is absolutely at the forefront of climate change. And what Eleng went through with trying to get back to her community is a direct result of things that are happening because of the way in which the rest of the world is living. And so in making this piece, which is of course actually made out of metal and looks quite industrial, she's entering into this very, very potent dialogue between her cultural identity as an Indigenous Taiwanese person and living as a global citizen. And that, I think, is a tension which is really, really important to explore, and which we in the UK can do a little bit to bring to the fore and to bring to audiences who really, really need to be addressed. And so this was the card for the exhibition that we made. As I say, you can see it, the online version at originsfestival.com. And I hope you enjoy it. And I think we've got 15 minutes left for a bit of a chat between us, and so we should. Let me see if I can come out of this. Okay, thank you all very much.
Come back, everyone. Come to the table. I have many questions, and there are some questions that have come in through both the chat and the Q&A. And Goting, please come. There you are. Great. Yes, so many questions. I'll just start because we have a limited amount of time, and I know it was wonderful, Michael, that you mentioned development. I was actually thinking more about creative development than financial and monetary, but I'm going to ask a question about that financial monetary side, because Alice, you mentioned at the beginning about Indigenous artists in Taiwan not always being very experienced at grant writing. And so can you just say a little bit more about that sourcing, seeking out funding, and how you or others that you know of can contribute to access to funds for those who may not be as experienced in securing those funds?
Okay. Because except the festival, the Pulimau Festival Award, we are a foundation and we provide grants. So the grant is for everyone. You can just submit for publications or research things, everything, almost everything that is related to culture. So we know most of the artists or researchers or our indigenous researchers, they cannot really write beautiful proposals. So it's kind of, we just encourage them, just give ideas. You don't have to make a beautiful format of proposal. You can just bring out your ideas and you give maybe 1 or 2 pages and that's it. That's also a good thing. Then we will start to discuss the things, because most of the applicants, we know many of them. We know what they do and we researched them. So actually it's not all based on the papers, Okay. But of course, if in terms of the festival or award, we do have more strict regulations. Yeah. So true, it is also important to learn how to write a proposal. So they can ask us or ask other friends to help them. And it's much easier for the young generations because they know how to write a beautiful proposal. So, well, I think that's because there are some boundaries and limits, but we do try our best to help them if they want someone to tell them how to write papers.
Right. You offer assistance.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing, now this goes toward a more aesthetic side of things, because you brought up the word contemporary, and the word traditional is often associated with Indigenous art. I mean, personally, I think traditional and contemporary coexist. They're not a division. They're not antithetical. They live together. But I was also wanted to draw that into in terms of Pulima, experimental, because that word can mean many things to different people. And I know you said that one of the offers was that new work could be regarded as experimental. Can you just tease that word out a little bit and how that fits in with the idea of contemporary traditional?
Well, we do have a lot of arguments and discourses about contemporary Indigenous art. But actually for us, contemporary means right now. It's just right now. And our present has connected to the past, to our ancestors. So I don't think the ideas of contemporary is the same with the Western arts ethics things. Actually, our artist does think contemporary means he's been able to connect the past and future.
Thank you. And Michael, do you have anything to add to that, or Abao?
Well, just to say, I think that's what traditional means too. You know, it's really interesting but you know, tradition only really works if it's passed on from generation to generation and therefore operates in the present. And you know what Chunghua just said about the contemporary being a connection to the past, that is the same thing. So I'm not sure that there's actually any division at all between traditional and contemporary when you're in this world of Indigenous arts, that inevitably, if it's traditional, it will be contemporary. And if it's contemporary in the sense that you've been talking about, it will draw off a tradition. Traditional art is hopeless if it's cut off from the contemporary, because it ceases to operate and to speak to an audience. But the moment that it's understood as something that flows through time and is therefore associated with the past and looks to the future, that's when it's vital and exciting.
Thank you. Abao, do you have any thoughts to add to that question?
传统跟现代，我自己一直觉得，如果我们活在现在的原住民，其实是这两个都同时都要学习的。对，就是要同时学习。就像我用母语来写歌，然后我同时要去问很多不同老人家的语汇或者是字应该怎么用。但是我在输出的时候，我还是会跟这些流行音乐的编曲去把它融合在一起。应该是说，现代的原住民创作者，我觉得要有这样的能力，你要自己把它消化成两个东西输入进去，你要消化成你的东西，是现在的原住民创作者我觉得比较特别的地方吧。
Okay, so Abel says that in terms of the traditional and the contemporary, I think the indigenous people living in the contemporary society, they need to learn both traditional things and modern things. Like myself, that because I write songs in my mother tongue, so sometimes doing the lyrics, I need to ask the elders to understand which words to be used in these songs. And but when I want to create a music, the output, I need to ask the popular musicians how to put the blend the indigenous language lyrics with the popular music genres. So I think the contemporary indigenous artists, they need to have the ability to learn different kind of the traditional and modern and put it together, combine it together. And I think this is a very unique ability for the contemporary indigenous artists in modern society in Taiwan.
Thank you. One thing that I was thinking about too is, Chenghua, you mentioned education, and I was thinking about educating audiences, and you know, maybe Michael and Abao, you are all doing that in one way or another. What does that mean? How does an audience who may be unfamiliar get to understand the context of contemporary Indigenous art making? Who wants to go first and jump in? Anybody?
Well, I'll go first then, because this, of course, is what we do all the time, because the festival is operating with an audience which is not made up of Indigenous people and isn't even made up with the people who live in the same country as Indigenous people. You know, it's not like Indigenous festivals in places like Canada and Australia, and I imagine in Taiwan as well. We have to educate everybody. And so it's always about context. It's which is why, you know, the ceremony at the beginning is so important. It's why the program is so important, and it's why the talks program is really important. And you know, when we do the live festival, the talks program is the middle weekend because that's when most people are there, because you get some people who are there for the first week, some are there for the same, they all overlap in the middle, and we get them all in the same room, and people are able to think about the issues much more widely. And yes, of course, that's educational in a broad sense. It doesn't mean we go out and examine people afterwards on their understanding of Indigenous cultures, but they examine themselves, and they examine themselves on how can I live better as a result of what I'm listening to. And that's absolutely genuine. I think education is right at the heart of it, and can be kind of incredibly shocking. And this year, what we've done is we have started the festival with a whole series of online talks, mainly with Indigenous writers, poets. Joy Harjo, the United States Poet Laureate, was the very first one. So that's a framing into which then the artwork later on can come over the course of a full year's festival in this case. And they're always there to refer back to. This is the nice thing about the online revolution, is that actually we are now building up a kind of corpus of educational materials which allow people to think through the art that they're looking at.
And without forgetting this question of education, you've just addressed another question that came in about community, connecting to communities, and how the pandemic has put some obstacles in the way of that, but finding new ways to keep the community connection going. And if I may say, because education can sound a bit dry and worthy and dusty, I like to think of it as discovery, making discoveries. And to me, those discoveries arise from self-examination, as you said, and simply exposure and visibility, things being made visible that I then expose myself to. Any thoughts on education, community, hybridity, Chenghua?
Yes, I agree with Michael. And I have to say, we just begin a platform. And this platform is for artists and for audiences. And I do think the only thing we have to make sure is we don't misuse any Indigenous culture or knowledges. And that's it. The audience have their responsibility to understand Indigenous culture, true, but they can, they can Google, they can get to know Indigenous peoples. They can make friends with many Indigenous people around them. And that's it. But when in terms of making, programming things, I have to say, we just create this bridge. We just bridge them together, and they will know what we're doing. The audience will know what we are doing, and if they have interest, they will try to learn more. And that's it. I'm a more positive person.
Michael, you have something to say?
Yeah, it's just when you said, Chenghua, that really interesting thing about not misusing the culture. I think that's one of the great educational hurdles, because I don't know if this is true in Taiwan, but certainly in Indigenous Australian or American cultures, there are things you are not supposed to know. And that is a huge thing for Westerners, because we've all got this crazy Enlightenment idea that, I've got to find out everything and you've got to tell me. And actually, when someone says no, that you are not at the level of understanding where that knowledge is available to you, and you probably never will be, that is a huge leap. But actually, there are things in Indigenous culture that you're not allowed to talk about. That's a secret. I was very struck when Abao was talking about the male-only space that she could not enter. There are certain things that are off limits, and that, I think, is really important. So thank you for bringing that up. It's really crucial.
Abao, you want to say something, I think.
Yeah. 我很同意刚刚就是 Michael 说，现在的人会很需要一次知道很多事情， 这件事情。我婷可以先翻译这句话。
Okay, so Abba agrees that Michael says that so many people, they just want to know much more about the culture. So much more, and I want to know much more about all the things. Yeah.
You know, I think that
但
that
是
is.
我比较
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
所以我比较幸运是因为我很常用社群，我自己在 Instagram 上面有5万，然后 Facebook 上面有10万的粉丝，所以我自己就是一个平台。我的方法会有3点，然后第一个是我的作品一次只讲一件事情，然后第二个是如果你要不同的群众马上可以吸引到看到你的作品在 MV 或视觉上面都要非常的美，所以艺术是可以帮忙这件事情非常多，就算是在 pop music 所有的东西都会有一个，这是我们的优点，因为原民文化的美感本身就有一个特别的样子。比方说我这一次就做了这个毛巾，这个是台湾族的太阳神，对，然后我们就做了这个周边。那漂亮的东西不管你是什么族群你都会看得懂，你要先 catch 他的眼光，他就会对你接下来要做的事情有兴趣。第3点是我在创作的时候会找我跟不同族群之间共同生活的点，比方说爱情，我有一首歌是讲原汉之间的恋爱，然后其实这首歌叫《答应无奈》，它就是大家彼此间都会很常发生不同族群之间有点像罗密欧与朱丽叶那样的故事吧，所以就获得非常多的回响。以上是我觉得要如何教育不同族群的人认识原民文化的几个要点。
Okay, so all right, so I can collect all the things. Okay, so Abba says like luckily I use the social media a lot. Like in my Instagram, I got like 50,000 people, and in a Facebook I got like 100,000 people. So I usually use these platforms to communicate with the audiences to educate them that. But I want to mention that the 3 points, the 3 very important points to create the field of the audiences, to enlarge the audience's field. So the first thing is that the one work, like one song, I just talk about one things, one issues. So not too much. And the second point is that because I want to attract different kind of the ethnic groups in Taiwan. So, you know, human beings always like the beautiful things. So the beauty, the arts helps a lot. So like the tower Abba just showed you that. So if that's beautiful, so everyone will, you know, concerned about that, and then everyone will take care about this and notice the very beautiful images. So you can attract all other audiences from different kind of ethnic groups. That's the second one. And the third thing is that creation. Actually, when I create my music, I will find some ideas about the common experience, like the love story. For example, my song 脚骨答应 is about the Han Chinese or Taiwanese and between Han Taiwanese and indigenous people, the love, like a drama called Romeo and Juliet. So when they understand the difference, the hardest of the love story, so this song attracts so many different kind of the audiences to listen. So the YouTube rate is very high. So that's why I doing this. So this is the 3 points that Abbas mentioned to educate the different kind of the ethnic groups for the audiences to understand the indigenous culture. Yeah, so I think that's it.
There was a question about making connections both locally and internationally. And I think the question was about how local and international can connect, but it may also be about any differences between making local connections and international connections.
他问国际连接之类的，就是在地跟
这个问题，好， 我最近刚好有一个合作的计划，9月10号的时候，我会参与马友友的新专辑，我有跟他合作一首歌。对，但是每次别人问我这个问题，我真的都不知道怎么回答，因为因为都是他们自己来找我，所以我不知道怎么说。我觉得可能对我来说，我只做一件事，就是你要一直不停的去了解你自己的东西。然后当你很特别的时候，别人就会看到你吧。对，因为对，就这样。
So okay. Okay. All right. So okay. So the thing is that sometimes is when people ask me about these questions about the connection between local and global international connections, that I kind of answer it because all the project actually is they invite me to join. So it's like recently I have a cooperation with the celloist Yo-Yo Ma in September. I will join his album for one song. And I think the most things is to understand yourself. If you can understand yourself, you will know what's the unique of your personality and your talent. So if you understand yourself, that others will know what's the unique of you, what you are being, some special persons, special artists.
Thank you. Chenghua, a question came in for you about programming new talents in both a kind of professional theater context, but also maybe in a community context. I think Pulima probably does both, right? There's a crossover perhaps between those two contexts. Do you want to say just a little bit about that?
Yes. I think it's just like Abao said, we create a platform, and this platform is for maybe exceptional artists, outstanding artists, and for young and talented artists. And both of them are looking for ways to know more of themselves, to know more of their cultures, and they pass down their knowledge to the next generations. So the same thing is our new talents. They're trying to find their way, no matter it is back home or to the world. They're just trying to find themselves. So what we do is we create a space. We just arranged, no matter it is in professional theater or in the communities, they just have the chance to give voices, and they had also the same opportunities to know themselves even deeper. So that's why we just encourage them to tell stories. That's it. Just tell stories, no matter who are the audience. Is it professional theater audience or community audience? You have to tell your stories, and that's it. And you have to, if something is wrong, then you just try to find the correct answer, and that's it.
And that leads me very nicely, I think, to ask you a question, Michael, since you brought up, yes, it's you, brought up climate and ecology and respect for the planet, because there was a question about politics, actually for all of you, but about, and we have been talking in these webinars quite a bit about artist activism. So any thoughts about the political nature of contemporary Indigenous art, or perhaps art in general? But I'm going to throw the big issue of politics, throwing the ball in your direction.
Yes, I have many thoughts about that. How long have we
I knew you would.
Well, the moment that you say Indigenous, the moment that you place an Indigenous body on the stage and label, I suppose, that person as Indigenous, or they label themselves as Indigenous, that is a political action. the moment we talk about Indigenous Taiwanese, we are acknowledging that there is an imperial relationship or a colonial relationship of some sort. And that isn't just now, you know, that's before the Republic of China, there was the Japanese occupation. Before that, there were Portuguese and Dutch occupations. The whole idea of indigeneity is necessarily political and therefore also anti-colonial. And that's become really important in the last year or so, when, you know, Black Lives Matter has been a huge movement globally, and of course Black, you know, doesn't have to be understood literally, because Black Indigenous people of color, they say in the United States. What it's actually talking about is the need to understand that the whole structure of white privilege has had its day and actually has to go, and we have to recognize common humanity on the most fundamental level. I mean, you know, to have to say that this particular type of human life matters, isn't that outrageous that we should even have to say that in the 21st century? And so Indigenous artists, like Millet's painting, saying, this is an Indigenous woman, look, here she is, on the wall, this is a statement, this is a truth, this is a present body, that is a political statement. Or when Elaine does that extraordinary sculpture about the journey made to a community which has been destroyed, that is also a political statement. And these politics are, to go back to your previous question, the way, Donald, these politics are local politics, but they are also global, because it's to do with understanding the value of the local in the context of a global system, and recognizing that actually what we need right now is not more global capitalism and more hugely successful, massively rich people, but what we actually need are people who live well in their place and who understand a relationship to land, and who understand the fragility of the ecosystem and the way in which we all have to live closely with it. And there's a creativity in that. And, you know, one of our big community project this year is actually about gardening and the cultivation of plants and land, respect for that, and ceremony around that. And just beginning to recognize that art, culture, ceremony, music, dance have a very, very immediate presence in our lives. That is also political.
And that understanding and that level of recognition has resonance.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad you brought up the word ceremony. I think on that note, that may be the final word that we have today, if you don't mind, because we need to wrap up. Sheshe, thank you all for being here, and thank you to our audience that has stayed with us. I know we've gone a bit over time, but bear with us. Thank you for that. The Taiwan Season 2021 online performances continue through the end of the month through summerhall.co.uk, should you want to see any of these 4 very fine filmed dance performances. I say go forth and live ceremonially today and every day if you can, in whatever way you can. Thank you for putting in that link to the Summer Hall there. And yes, it's been great. And this is the final webinar. So if we were all together, I would be cracking open this bottle, and there's it there. You're ready. You've got your vessels ready to pour. Go forth and enjoy. Celebrate. Thank you. Celebrate politically and creatively.
Follow. Thank you.